When I first stumbled upon that forgotten patch of land by the lake, I wasn't looking for trouble. I wasn't even looking for peace, to be honest. I was just looking for a place that felt like mine, something untouched by the endless noise of HOA meetings, parking citations, and neighborly gossip that pretends to be civility. I'd had enough of that kind of life. After years of working in real estate construction, building homes I could never afford and dealing with people who thought owning a pool gave them divine authority, I decided it was time to build something for myself. So when I saw the "For Sale by Owner" sign half buried in the weeds at the edge of Willow Ridge Lake, I knew this was it. The sign was crooked, faded from sun and time, but the moment I saw the reflection of the morning light dancing on the still water, I felt something shift in my chest. It was calm, private, and best of all, outside the boundaries of the HOA that ruled the nearby subdivision like a little kingdom. The seller was an older man named Bill, retired, with hands that looked like they'd split 1,000 logs and eyes that had seen more seasons than I could count. He told me his late father had owned the land since the 50s. It was technically lakefront, but not part of the Willow Ridge Estates development. The HOA had tried to buy it years ago to make it part of their community recreation area, but Bill refused. He said they wanted to drain part of the lake for some fancy landscaping and install members-only docks. When he wouldn't sell, they called his property an eyesore. Bill laughed when he told me that, but I could still see the bitterness tucked behind his grin. They hate that this little piece doesn't belong to them, he said. But it's legal. It's separate. Always has been. You buy it, and it's all yours, the shore, the water rights, and peace from their nonsense. That was all I needed to hear. I closed the deal faster than any I'd ever done in my career. Within a week, the papers were signed, and that neglected patch of land was mine. No HOA fees. No meetings. No architectural review committee approving what kind of mailbox I could have. Just the soft hum of cicadas and the scent of pine drifting through the warm summer air. It felt like the start of something good. I parked my truck by the waterline that first evening, pulled out a folding chair, and cracked open a cold beer. Across the lake, I could see the neat row of houses from the HOA neighborhood, all identical, all perfect. Lawn sprinklers ticked in unison like synchronized soldiers. And though it was peaceful, there was something almost sterile about that side of the lake. I smiled to myself. I wasn't part of that world anymore. But peace never lasts long where Karens live. I didn't know her name then. I only knew her as the angry woman in the wide-brimmed sun hat who walked her Pomeranian around the lake every morning at precisely 7:30. She always wore that tight expression, lips pursed, sunglasses perched like a judge about to deliver a verdict. The first time she saw me sitting by the shore, she slowed down, frowned, and then walked away briskly. The second time, she stopped. "Excuse me," she called out across the water. "Are you supposed to be here?" I turned around, beer in hand. "Pretty sure I am," I said. "This is a private lake," she snapped. "Not this side," I replied calmly, gesturing toward the faded wooden sign Bill had left behind that red private property, "No trespassing." She scowled. "We'll see about that," she said, and stormed off, her little dog yapping behind her. I should have seen that as the first warning sign. The next week, I started clearing brush from the shoreline. The place was overgrown, full of weeds and driftwood. I wanted to make it livable, maybe build a small cabin or fishing dock eventually. Every morning, I'd bring my tools, put on some music, and lose myself in the rhythm of work. But by the third day, I noticed something odd. Every time I looked up, there she was, standing on the other side of the property line, watching. Not a friendly kind of curiosity either, but the kind that said she was taking mental notes for a complaint letter. And sure enough, it didn't take long before I got my first visit from the so-called Lake Committee. 3 people showed up one afternoon, 2 men and that same woman, now holding a clipboard like it was a sword. "Good afternoon," one of the men said stiffly. "We're from the Willow Ridge Homeowners Association." We've had several reports of unauthorized activity on community land. I leaned against my shovel and smiled. This isn't community land. It's private. I bought it from Bill Henderson last month. The woman, who I would later learn was named Karen Lawson, the HOA president herself, frowned. That's impossible. The lake is under Willow Ridge jurisdiction. Actually, I said, reaching into my backpack and pulling out a copy of the deed, this part isn't. I handed it to her, watching her eyes dart across the legal print. She read it twice, her lips tightening with every line. Finally, she looked up, face flushed. Well, regardless, she said sharply, you can't just alter the natural appearance of the shoreline. It affects the aesthetic harmony of the community. I laughed. Aesthetic harmony? You mean the grass and gravel? Her nostrils flared. I mean the lakefront view that our residents pay to maintain. Then they should have bought this side when they had the chance, I said, turning back to my work. That was the moment I knew she'd declared war. For the next several weeks, things escalated in quiet but calculated ways. I'd find warning notices taped to the old post near the shore, stamped with the HOA seal, demanding I cease unauthorized modifications. One morning I woke to find bright orange cones blocking the dirt road to my property. Another day, my garbage bins were knocked over, their contents scattered. It was childish, petty, and absolutely Karen. But I didn't bite. Instead, I doubled down. If she hated that I was there, I'd give her something to really complain about. I started by cleaning up the shore properly, cutting away the weeds, installing some wooden benches, and putting up a new, private property, sign. Then I built a small dock. It wasn't anything fancy at first, just some planks, posts, and rope railings. But it looked good. Real good. The kind of spot you'd want to sit at sunset with a fishing rod and forget about the world. The day I finished it, Karen came marching over again, this time with her phone out, recording. Sir, I'm documenting this violation, she said. You cannot build unauthorized structures on community water property. I didn't even look up from the dock. Ma'am, this water belongs to the state, and I have riparian rights to this section. I'm well within the law. Riparian, what? She asked, confused. Means I can use the water that touches my property, I said. You might want to Google it before you start recording people. Her phone lowered just a little. You can't just do whatever you want. I smiled. Isn't that the whole point of not being in an HOA? She huffed, spun on her heel, and stomped off. I watched her leave, half amused, half irritated. I didn't know it yet, but she was about to make my life a whole lot more interesting, and not in the good way. The following week, a letter arrived in my mailbox. Not a friendly one. It was printed on official Willow Ridge HOA letterhead, complete with an embossed gold seal. Inside was a notice of violation accusing me of trespassing, environmental disruption, and unauthorized alteration of community aesthetics. They even included a fine of $500 payable to the HOA treasury. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my coffee. They actually thought they could fine me. So I wrote back, politely, of course, explaining that I was not, and never would be, a member of their HOA, and that any attempt to collect payment would be considered harassment. Then, just to rub it in, I included a photo of myself sitting on my new dock, feet in the water, beer in hand, smiling at the camera with the caption, enjoying my NONHOA lakefront view. That must have driven her crazy. 2 days later, Karen showed up again, this time with a county code inspector. She stood behind him like a general leading a charge. The inspector looked bored, clearly realizing within minutes that nothing illegal was happening. Ma'am, he told her, this property's outside your HOA boundary. He's not breaking any county codes either. You should let it go. But Karen didn't hear him. Or she didn't want to. This is ruining our lake's appearance, she shouted. It's unfair that our residents pay for upkeep while ma'am, the inspector interrupted, the county doesn't recognize your HOA's authority over private property. If you keep filing false complaints, you could face penalties yourself. I thought that would be the end of it. But with Karens, there's no such thing as the end. She didn't give up. Instead, she changed tactics. The next week, I started noticing HOA residents coming to fish by my dock. At first, I didn't mind, I figured they were just curious. But then, when I came home one afternoon, I found a group of teenagers swimming, leaving trash all over my shore. When I asked them to leave, they said, "Karen told us this is a shared community area now." That was it. I'd had enough. If they wanted to use my dock so badly, I'd let them, for a price. I printed a big wooden sign and nailed it to the dock post, "Private dock, non-HOA residents free, HOA members, $25 daily access fee. Pay before entering." You should have seen the faces on the first few people who came by. Some laughed. Some grumbled. But a few actually paid, mostly kids who just wanted to fish and didn't care about HOA politics. I used the money to buy new paint and upgrade the dock railing. It was my own little victory. And when Karen saw it, oh, she lost it. She stormed over that evening, phone in one hand, HOA handbook in the other, shouting that I was extorting community members and operating an unlicensed marina. I couldn't help but laugh. "Karen," I said, "you and your people have been using my dock, my land, and my peace for weeks. I'm just charging rent." She called the sheriff that night. The deputy showed up, polite but clearly tired. After a quick look at my paperwork, he told her the same thing everyone else had, I wasn't breaking any laws. In fact, since it was private property, she could technically be charged for trespassing. The deputy turned to her and said, "Ma'am, you're the one causing the disturbance here." Karen's face turned red. "This isn't over," she shouted as she walked away. I smiled. "Oh, I'm counting on it." Little did I know, that was only the beginning of the storm she was about to unleash. The days that followed that showdown with Karen were oddly quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't mean peace, but preparation. I'd been around people like her before. When they stop talking, that's when you know they're planning something. And I was right. It started with letters again, but not the usual HOA garbage. These were official-looking envelopes, from the county, the environmental department, and even the tax office. One after another. Each one full of allegations, complaints, or routine inspections that conveniently started right after my little dock fee sign went up. It was obvious what was happening. Karen wasn't just angry, she was mobilizing every bureaucratic weapon she could find. The first inspector came on a Tuesday morning. A middle-aged man in khaki pants and a badge clipped to his belt, stepping carefully over the gravel like he was afraid of catching something. "Mr. Hayes?" he asked, checking his clipboard. "That's me," I said, wiping sweat from my forehead. "Environmental Services. We received reports of shoreline contamination, possibly from construction waste being dumped into the lake." I laughed out loud. "Contamination? The only thing I dumped was sweat." He smirked. "That's usually how these go," he admitted, crouching near the dock and dipping a small vial into the water. "Don't worry, we get these HOA complaints all the time. They'll test it, but I can already tell this water's cleaner than the stuff behind their manicured lawns." Sure enough, 2 weeks later, the results came back clear. No contamination. No violations. Karen's first strike failed. Then came the property boundary inspection. She must have gone digging through county maps, trying to prove that my dock extended into community easement territory. 3 guys from zoning came out with survey gear, tripods, and laser scanners. They spent half a day measuring and muttering to each other while I sat on the tailgate of my truck sipping lemonade. At the end, their supervisor came over. "You're fine," he said, packing up his notes. Completely outside HOA jurisdiction. Actually, your boundary line goes 5 feet further into the water than you've built. I grinned. Guess I'll make the dock longer, then. He laughed. Wouldn't blame you. That evening, when I started adding a small extension to the dock, purely symbolic, I noticed movement across the lake. There she was again. Karen, standing on her perfect green lawn, binoculars pressed to her face like she was guarding national secrets. When she saw me wave, she froze, then turned and stomped back toward her house. I could almost hear her grinding her teeth from across the water. By now, the entire neighborhood knew about me, the guy who bought the lake. Some of them were curious, others just nosy. But surprisingly, a few actually reached out. One evening, an older couple named Rick and Donna stopped by in their canoe. "We heard you're the man who finally stood up to Karen," Rick said, smiling. "We owe you a beer just for that." I laughed, pulling them onto the dock. "You live over there?" "Yeah," Donna said, pointing toward a cozy house near the bend. "We've been in Willow Ridge for 15 years. Used to love it. But ever since Karen took over the HOA, it's been nothing but rules and fines. You hang a flag wrong, you get a citation. You plant the wrong color flowers, she writes you up. She's power hungry." I nodded. I noticed. They told me stories, how she once had a man fined because his garage door paint didn't match community palette, how she banned kids from setting up lemonade stands because they weren't licensed vendors. It sounded insane, but I could believe every word. "You're kind of our hero, you know," Rick said with a grin. "You did what we all wanted to do, you got out." I smiled. "I didn't just get out. I'm right next door. And I'm not leaving." Word spread faster than wildfire. Suddenly, I wasn't the villain Karen made me out to be, I was the rebel with a dock. Neighbors started sneaking over in the evenings, just to talk. Some brought beer, others brought stories. And every one of them had something in common, they were tired of her control. Karen must have noticed, because she stepped up her campaign. The next move was public humiliation. She started posting on the HOA's private Facebook page, screenshots people later sent me. Long, ranting posts about how I was a safety hazard, how I endangered children by inviting unauthorized use of the lake, and how I was profiting off community resources. She even included a blurry photo of me cleaning my dock, with the caption, "Would you trust this man around your property?" I almost pitied her. Almost. But the real twist came when she tried to outsmart me legally. She filed for an emergency community meeting with the HOA board to propose a shared water access initiative, basically trying to claim that the entire lake should fall under HOA management for the good of the residents. The motion passed within her board, of course, they were her friends, and she proudly sent a notice to the county declaring new lake management jurisdiction. Unfortunately for her, that was illegal. See, I'd already done my homework. The moment I bought that land, I registered the water rights with the county clerk. My property line extended 50 feet into the water, a legal boundary confirmed by state survey. So when she filed that document, she accidentally violated the state's Riparian Land Act, claiming jurisdiction she didn't have. That was the moment I decided it was time to stop defending myself and start fighting back. I called an attorney, not just any attorney, but a former HOA law specialist I'd worked with years ago during construction projects. His name was Greg Wallace. The man was sharp, sarcastic, and absolutely loved dismantling overreaching HOAs. "Let me guess," he said when I explained the situation. "You've got a Karen on your hands." "The original one," I said. He laughed. "All right, send me everything, letters, fines, complaints, her little jurisdiction stunt. I'll take care of it." 2 weeks later, Karen received a cease and desist letter from Greg's office, a thick packet of legal firepower citing property law, harassment statutes, and potential defamation claims. It was beautiful. And just to make sure it stung, I posted a picture on my social media with the caption, "When you play HOA games, you win HOA consequences." That picture went viral locally. People started commenting, sharing, even laughing about it. Some folks from neighboring communities messaged me saying, "Man, I wish we had someone like you." Karen, however, didn't find it funny. She showed up again a few days later, this time alone. It was late evening, the sky painted with orange and purple streaks. I was sitting on the dock, watching the sunset when I heard her voice behind me. "You think this is funny, don't you?" I turned slowly. She stood there, arms crossed, that same righteous fury burning in her eyes. "Depends what this is," I said. "You're mocking me. Mocking our community. Turning our neighborhood into a circus." I stood up, calm. "I didn't turn it into a circus, Karen. You did, the moment you tried to control something you don't own." She glared at me, breathing hard. "You're a troublemaker. People like you ruin neighborhoods. People like me." I repeated, stepping closer. "Or people who don't bow to you." For a moment, I thought she might actually slap me. Her hand twitched. But instead, she took a deep breath, pointed a finger at me, and said, "You'll regret this." Then she turned and walked away, her silhouette shrinking into the twilight. It was quiet again. But that night, something strange happened. Around midnight, I heard a motor, faint but steady. I stepped outside with a flashlight, scanning the lake. That's when I saw it, a small pontoon boat drifting toward my dock. 2 figures aboard. When the light hit them, they panicked, cutting the motor. I shouted, "Hey! Get off my property!" But they didn't respond, just threw something into the water and sped off toward the HOA side. The next morning, I found what they'd dumped, garbage bags full of lawn waste, clippings, even broken plastic. It was obvious, they were trying to make it look like I was polluting the lake. That was the final straw. I set up security cameras that afternoon, motion activated, high resolution, with night vision. I mounted one on the dock, one on a nearby tree, and another near the entrance road. Then I waited. It didn't take long. 2 nights later, the same boat returned. This time, the camera caught everything, the boat's number, the faces, even Karen herself, sitting at the front like some vigilante queen. The next morning, I called Greg. "Got something you'll want to see." By evening, he'd filed a report with the sheriff's department, illegal dumping, trespassing, and property vandalism. The deputy who responded couldn't believe it. "Man," he said, watching the footage, "I've seen HOA drama, but this is next level." Karen was served a formal warning that week. She tried to play innocent, claiming she was investigating environmental concerns, but the video didn't lie. The next HOA meeting was chaos. Several residents turned on her, demanding explanations, tired of being dragged into her obsession. One man even shouted, "You're embarrassing us, Karen." That was the beginning of her unraveling. From then on, things shifted. More neighbors started visiting my dock, openly now. Some came to fish, others just to talk. They brought snacks, laughter, music. The place came alive. And every time I looked across the lake at Karen's perfect, sterile lawn, I could see her watching from behind her curtains. It must have burned her inside, that the more she fought me, the more people gravitated toward what she hated most, freedom. I didn't stop there, though. Using the funds I'd collected from dock passes and a few generous donations, I upgraded the place, built a small boathouse, added solar lights along the dock's edge, even set up a community grill area for weekend barbecues. And just to make it perfectly clear who owned the place, I painted a wooden sign that said, "Welcome to Freedom Dock, no HOA rules apply." That sign became a local landmark. People started taking photos with it. Couples came for evening walks, fishermen called it their favorite spot, and even families from nearby towns started visiting. It was no longer just my escape, it was a symbol of standing up to control. Karen, meanwhile, kept trying, emails, letters, even calling the local news claiming I was illegally operating a public venue. But when reporters came and saw the truth, they ended up writing a story titled, "Man Builds Private Dock After Escaping HOA Control, Community Cheers." That one went viral too. For the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't in a long time, freedom with purpose. And as I stood there one warm evening, looking out over the calm water reflecting the orange glow of sunset, I realized something. Karen hadn't just given me trouble. She'd given me a story, one that would last far longer than her power ever would. It's funny how quiet things get right before the biggest storm. For a few months after the news story went viral, I almost thought Karen had finally accepted defeat. The HOA meetings slowed down. No more letters. No more inspectors. The air around the lake felt lighter, the neighbors friendlier. Even the sun seemed to shine a little warmer on the water. I should have known better. Karens don't surrender, they retreat, plan, and come back stronger. It began again one crisp autumn morning. I was loading lumber into my truck for another small project when a white envelope appeared in my mailbox. Thick paper, embossed seal. I knew that look. But this wasn't HOA stationery, it was from the county civil court. My stomach dropped as I opened it. Inside was a lawsuit. Karen Lawson, acting on behalf of the Willow Ridge Homeowners Association, was suing me for illegally profiting from community property, creating environmental hazards, and public nuisance affecting neighborhood property values. They were demanding the removal of my dock, restitution fees, and appropriate damages for emotional distress caused to residents. I laughed, but it wasn't the amused kind of laugh. It was the kind that comes out when you're too angry to yell. I read the paperwork 3 times. Every page was worse than the last. She'd somehow convinced the HOA board to back her up. She'd even attached screenshots of her posts, blurry pictures of my dock, and statements from concerned residents, people who probably had no idea what they were signing. For a second, I actually felt tired. Tired of the fight, the games, the constant need to defend what was rightfully mine. But then I thought about all the people who had come to the dock, who told me how much they loved having a place where they could breathe without fear of HOA fines. That thought snapped me right back into focus. I called Greg, my attorney. He didn't sound surprised. She finally pulled the lawsuit card, he said, sighing. Classic. Don't worry, we'll shred this in court. She's claiming I'm profiting off community land, I said. Yeah, well, she can claim she's Queen of England too, doesn't make it true. Still, even with Greg's confidence, the next few weeks were rough. Karen had turned the neighborhood into a battleground again. Flyers showed up on doors saying, "Protect our lake, stop the exploitation." She even went door to door, convincing people that my dock would bring in outsiders and drive down home values. Some believed her. Others just wanted peace. But then, something unexpected happened. People started coming forward, on my side. Rick and Donna were the first. They gave Greg sworn statements about how Karen had harassed residents for years and how my property had actually increased community enjoyment. Then came a young couple, Jamie and Sarah, who said Karen fined them for having a plastic playset in their yard. A few more followed, all with stories of petty fines, intimidation, and manipulation. Before long, Greg had a binder full of testimonies that painted a clear picture. This lawsuit wasn't about environmental damage. She avoided looking at me, but I caught her whispering to her lawyer, a young guy who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. The judge entered, an older woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense tone. Case number 4816, she began. Willow Ridge HOA versus Mr. Daniel Hayes. Karen's lawyer stood first, launching into a speech about protecting community integrity and preserving natural beauty. It was all fluff, no fact. Then Karen herself insisted on speaking. "Your Honor," she said, standing dramatically, "this man has disrespected our community, polluted our waters, and profited off property that rightfully belongs to the Homeowners Association. He has brought strangers into our neighborhood, people we don't know, who don't belong here, and he charges our residents money to use what should be shared." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Do you have documentation proving the HOA owns this section of land?" Karen hesitated. "Well, not exactly owned, but it's part of our community's aesthetic responsibility. That's not ownership," the judge interrupted. "Continue, Mr. Hayes." Greg stood, calm and confident. "Your Honor, my client owns the parcel of land in question outright. It's not within the Willow Ridge HOA boundaries. The property deed, water rights registration, and state survey all confirm this. Additionally, we have evidence that the HOA, led by Mrs. Lawson, has repeatedly harassed and defamed my client." Karen tried to cut him off. "That's a lie. And even engaged in illegal dumping on his property," Greg continued, handing the judge a USB drive. "Video evidence, time-stamped." The courtroom went silent. Karen's face turned pale. The judge reviewed the footage right there in court. When she saw Karen and her little task force tossing garbage bags into the lake, her expression hardened. "Mrs. Lawson," she said, her voice low and controlled, "care to explain this?" Karen stammered. That's taken out of context. We were conducting cleanup. With garbage bags full of debris." Karen's lawyer sank lower in his seat. After that, it was all downhill for her. Greg presented the letters, the false claims, the cease and desist she ignored. He even brought up the local news story that proved my property was outside the HOA. By the end, it was like watching a castle crumble brick by brick. Finally, the judge spoke. "Mrs. Lawson, this case is not only without merit, it borders on harassment. The defendant has the full right to maintain and profit from his own property as long as it complies with county law. You and the HOA are hereby ordered to cease all contact and pay restitution for legal expenses." Karen's jaw dropped. The courtroom gasped. I sat there, stunned. I hadn't expected to win that decisively. When it was over, she stormed out without a word, her heels clicking like gunshots against the tile. Greg turned to me, smiling. "Told you we'd shred it." But even though I'd won, something about that moment lingered with me. I could tell by the way she walked out, stiff, trembling, that this wasn't the end for her emotionally. She'd lost more than a lawsuit. She'd lost control. And for people like her, that's worse than losing money. After that, the community really began to change. Without Karen's constant micromanagement, the HOA meetings became shorter, friendlier. People started decorating their yards the way they wanted. Kids played on the streets again. You could almost feel the neighborhood breathe. One Saturday afternoon, Rick and Donna came by with a few others and brought food, burgers, chips, lemonade. "We figured it's time we all celebrated," Donna said. "Your doc started this whole thing." We fired up the grill, music played, and laughter filled the air. The sun glinted off the lake like scattered diamonds, and for once, there wasn't a single voice raised in anger. Just peace. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw her. Karen. She was standing across the lake, by her porch, watching. Her once pristine lawn looked neglected, patches of brown where the sprinklers had stopped. Her flags hung limp. The once bustling HOA house seemed lifeless. She didn't yell, didn't wave. Just stood there, arms folded, as if trying to make sense of the world she'd lost. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered the nights she sent people to my property, the lies she spread, the stress she caused. She tried to destroy something that wasn't hers, all because she couldn't stand the idea of not being in control. That evening, when the crowd left and the lake quieted again, I sat alone on my dock. The water was still, catching the fading orange of the sky. I thought about everything that had happened, the fights, the letters, the courtroom drama, and how it had all led to this. Freedom had never come easy. But it was worth every battle. That's when I decided to do something that would turn this victory into something lasting. I called a local community center the next morning and proposed a small weekend program, free fishing lessons for kids, nature cleanup days, and outdoor movie nights on the dock. I didn't want to profit anymore, I wanted to build something real, something good. Within weeks, it took off. Families came together, laughter filled the evenings, and kids' laughter echoed over the lake. Local businesses even offered to sponsor events. The Freedom Dock wasn't just a symbol anymore, it was a gathering place, a reminder that community doesn't need control to exist. One evening, as I packed up after an event, a woman approached me quietly. I turned, and it was Karen. She looked different. No suit, no clipboard. Just a simple sweater and jeans. For the first time, she looked human. I came to apologize, she said softly. I let things get out of hand. I studied her face. There were lines there that hadn't been before, stress, maybe regret. I appreciate that, I said. Took guts to come here. She nodded, glancing at the lake. You've done something good with this place. I just wanted people to have a spot to breathe, I said. She sighed. You know. I thought control made people feel safe. Turns out it just made them afraid. For the first time, I believed her. We stood there in silence for a while, watching the sunset paint the sky. Then she said, maybe it's time I stepped back. Let someone else run things. I smiled faintly. Might not be a bad idea. She nodded, turned, and walked away. As the ripples faded across the water, I realized something simple but powerful. Sometimes the best way to win isn't by fighting harder, it's by showing what real freedom looks like. The lake was calm again. The dock stood strong. And for the first time since I'd bought this land, everything finally felt right. The weeks after the dock incident were loud. Not the kind of loud that fills the air with laughter, engines, and splashing water, the good kind of noise. No, this was the chaos kind, the rumble of pickup trucks, the whine of drills, and the constant hum of angry voices bouncing across the lake. It seemed the HOA had declared an unspoken war against me. They couldn't touch my property legally, the county records were ironclad, but that didn't stop them from trying to make life difficult. Every morning, I'd wake up to find they whispered about me in grocery aisles, shook their heads when I walked by, and muttered things like, he's just trying to stir trouble, or, he should have stayed in the HOA like everyone else. I didn't blame them. People fear what they don't understand, and to them, I was the anomaly, the one who refused to bow to the system they'd all grown used to. But slowly, the narrative began to shift. It started with the dock. I'd built it clean, wide, with benches and railings, the kind of dock that looked like something out of a summer postcard. Families from nearby neighborhoods, ones not bound by the HOA, started visiting. They'd bring coolers, fishing poles, and laughter. Kids ran barefoot along the boards, jumping into the lake while their parents grilled burgers by the shore. Word spread faster than wildfire. The HOA's private lake suddenly wasn't the only attraction in town. People began talking. Have you seen the dock across the county line? It's free if you know the owner. Way nicer than the HOA side. The more people came, the angrier Karen got. You could practically see the steam rise from her cul-de-sac when she drove by and saw the parking lot I'd set up near the waterline. I didn't charge anyone at first, it was about community, not profit. But when the HOA started accusing me of stealing their residents, I decided it was time to twist the knife just a bit. So, I installed a little booth. Nothing fancy, a wooden stand with a roof and a sign that read, Dock Use, $5 entry, HOA members $10. The irony was delicious. The first time a group of HOA residents came over, I could tell they didn't realize what side of the lake they were on. They parked their golf carts, walked down in their bright swimsuits, and froze when they saw the sign. One of them, a man named Steve who used to glare at me from across the road, squinted at it and muttered, "Is this serious?" I smiled from my seat near the booth and said, "Sure is. HOA's gotta pay a little extra, maintenance fees, you know." He looked like he wanted to argue, but instead, he pulled out a $10 bill. I gave him a receipt with my logo, Lake Liberty Dock and Recreation, and watched him march down the pier, grumbling the whole way. That's when things really started to get under Karen's skin. She tried everything to stop me. Letters. Complaints. Even a petition to the county. But each one hit the same wall: my property wasn't under her jurisdiction. Her own HOA charter couldn't touch me. I had become a free man in a fenced world. Every attempt she made to challenge that freedom just made her look more desperate. The county clerk even called me once, laughing, saying, "She's been here 3 times this week trying to extend her authority." I told him, "Tell her she can extend her authority as far as her driveway. That's it." Then came the night she crossed the line. It was early June, and the air was thick with humidity. I'd stayed up late cleaning up the dock after a busy weekend crowd. Around midnight, I heard a truck engine outside. When I stepped out with my flashlight, I saw taillights flickering by the shoreline. I approached quietly and caught a glimpse of 3 people trying to pour something into the water. The stench hit me: diesel fuel. They were trying to contaminate my lake. My lake. The one I'd spent months cleaning, protecting, and sharing. I shouted, "Hey! What the hell do you think you're doing?" The figures froze. One of them tripped over a gas can, and another turned. It was Karen. Her face twisted between shock and fury, the flashlight beam catching the rage in her eyes. "You think you can mock me? You think you can humiliate this neighborhood?" she screamed. Her voice cracked under the weight of her own madness. I pulled out my phone and started recording. "Keep talking, Karen," I said calmly. "The sheriff's gonna love this." That was all it took. The others bolted, their truck peeling out of the mud, spraying gravel as they sped off. Karen stood there trembling, realizing she'd gone too far. When the deputies arrived, she tried to spin it, said it was a misunderstanding, that she thought someone had been dumping oil already and came to inspect. But the video told another story. Her HOA presidency didn't save her from the citation and fine that followed. After that night, everything changed. HOA members started avoiding her. Some even came to apologize to me in person. One older gentleman brought over a pie, saying, didn't realize how crazy she'd gotten till that night. I told him it was water under the bridge, or, in this case, under the dock. The county ordered her to step down from the board temporarily, citing misconduct. She hated every second of it. But me? I just kept building. I added a gazebo, some string lights, and a little bait shop on the corner. Business was good. Peace was better. And yet, deep down, I knew this wasn't the end of Karen's story. People like her don't fade quietly. They simmer. They plan. They wait for another chance to strike back. But I wasn't the same man she first messed with. I'd built more than just a dock. I'd built a symbol of defiance, of freedom, of what it means to stand your ground when the world tries to cage you in. Every nail in that dock, every plank, was a reminder that sometimes, the best revenge isn't anger. It's ownership. I often sat at the end of the dock in the evenings, watching the sun dip below the tree line, the water turning gold. The lake was calm, but alive, frogs croaked, fish leapt, and the wind carried the sound of laughter from nearby campers. It felt like peace finally had a home here. But sometimes, when the air was still, I'd hear the faint rumble of an engine from the other side of the lake, and I'd know, Karen hadn't forgotten. She was just waiting. It was late August when the quiet broke again. The summer heat had settled like a heavy blanket over the valley, making the lake shimmer under the sun. Business at the dock was better than ever, families swimming, fishermen hauling in bass, teenagers laughing in kayaks. It felt alive, like the place had healed itself. But beneath that calm, something uneasy lingered. I couldn't explain it at first, just that eerie feeling that someone was watching, waiting. One evening, just before sunset, I got a letter in the mail. No return address, just my name printed neatly across the front. Inside was a single sheet of paper that read, "Enjoy your freedom while it lasts. HOA board reinstates Karen effective immediately." I laughed when I first saw it. It sounded like a joke, like someone trying to spook me. But when I drove into town the next morning, there she was, standing outside the community center, wearing that smug smile like a crown. Her sunglasses glinted, and even from across the lot, I could feel her eyes locked on me. The war had reignited. For a while, she stayed quiet, which made it worse. People like Karen are predictable when they're loud, but dangerous when they're silent. I saw her at council meetings, whispering to county inspectors. I saw her at the diner, talking with the sheriff. Always with that same expression, composed, calculating. And then it started again. Anonymous complaints about noise violations, about commercial use of residential land, about unauthorized structures. The county officers came out multiple times, each time leaving with the same answer, everything's compliant. But then came a visit I didn't expect, a man in a gray suit, driving a county vehicle. He introduced himself as an environmental compliance officer and said he was there to review my shoreline modifications. He spoke with that bureaucratic politeness that hides a knife. After a lengthy inspection, he finally said, "You've done a good job here. But technically, your dock extends 6 feet beyond the allowable distance into the waterline." I frowned. "The previous inspector cleared that," I said. He smiled thinly. "Yes, well, that was before a new complaint was filed. By your HOA." That night, I sat on the dock, watching the reflection of my lights ripple in the water. My stomach churned with frustration. I knew what she was doing, trying to wear me down with red tape until I gave up. But she didn't understand that I'd built my life around persistence. Every board in that dock was a fight I'd already won. Still, the thought of dismantling something I'd poured my soul into just because of a technicality made my chest tighten with anger. A week later, a storm rolled in. The kind of storm that turns daylight into dusk. Thunder cracked over the hills, and sheets of rain hammered the lake. I was inside the house, watching from the window, when I saw movement by the shore. Headlights. 2 of them. At first, I thought maybe someone was seeking shelter, but as the lights got closer, I saw the shape of a truck. It backed up near the dock, and I could make out figures stepping out, one of them holding a crowbar. My blood went cold. I grabbed my flashlight and ran out into the rain, my boots sinking into the mud. The storm wind howled, pushing sheets of rain across my face, but I kept running until I reached the dock. There they were, 3 men in raincoats, trying to pry loose the dock's edge boards. I shouted, "Hey! Get the hell away from there!" The beam of my flashlight cut across the rain and caught one face, Steve. The same man who'd paid $10 to use the dock. His expression was twisted with guilt and anger. "Karen says this dock's illegal," he yelled over the storm. "We're taking it down before the county does." Before I could reach them, a 4th figure stepped out from the truck, Karen. Her hair was plastered to her face, her eyes wild, rain running down her jacket. "You brought this on yourself," she screamed. "You embarrassed this neighborhood. You made a mockery of everything we built." Her voice cracked, part fury, part madness. I stopped at the edge of the dock, chest heaving. "You did this to yourself, Karen," I shouted back. "You couldn't stand someone living free. Someone not bowing to your rules." For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then a crack of thunder hit so loud it rattled my bones. Lightning flashed, and in that split second, I saw the dock shift under the force of the wind. One of the boards snapped loose, and Steve stumbled, nearly falling into the water. Karen lunged forward to grab him, but her foot slipped. I didn't think, I just moved. I reached out, catching her arm just as she lost balance. For a second, our eyes met, hers wide with fear, mine with disbelief. Let go of me, she screamed, thrashing. But I held on. You'll drown. I yelled. The rain made everything slick, the dock trembling under our weight. Steve and the others froze, too shocked to move. Finally, with one heave, I pulled her up, both of us collapsing onto the boards, soaked and gasping. The storm raged on, but the fight had drained out of everyone. They left in silence. Even Karen didn't say a word as she climbed back into the truck, her face pale under the headlights. The next morning, I found the dock still standing. Beaten, splintered in places, but strong. Like it had weathered more than a storm, like it had proved something. Later that day, a county truck rolled up again. The same compliance officer stepped out, clipboard in hand. We've reviewed your case, he said. After last night's events and the footage we received from your security camera, he gestured to the small cam mounted on my porch, we're closing the file. No violations. Turns out, the whole thing had been recorded, Karen's illegal destruction attempt, the trespassing, the chaos. When the sheriff saw it, he issued a restraining order against her. The HOA board voted unanimously to remove her for good. This time, there would be no reinstatement. Months passed after that. The lake healed again, just like before. The dock got repaired, stronger, smoother, with a new coat of sealant and a bronze plaque on one post that read, "Freedom built here." People still came every weekend. Some brought kids, some came to fish, some just sat at the end of the dock to watch the sunset. A few former HOA residents became regulars. Even Steve came by once, awkwardly handing me a coffee and saying, "Guess we got played, huh?" I nodded. Yeah. But at least we learned something. Sometimes I'd sit out there alone, watching the sky melt from gold to purple, and think about how things had changed. Karen had tried to destroy everything I'd built, but in the end, she'd only made it stronger. Freedom, I realized, isn't about escaping control once. It's about standing up every time someone tries to take it away. That dock wasn't just wood and nails anymore. It was a monument, to stubbornness, to peace, to every man who's ever had to fight just to live on his own terms. And as the wind brushed across the lake, carrying the smell of pine and rain, I couldn't help but smile. Because out here, on this side of the water, the rules were mine. And Karen, well, she finally learned what happens when you try to cage a man who owns the lake.